Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's presentation and discussion of the Oxford Interfaith Forum. My name is Del Case, and I'm a senior fellow of the OIF. Welcome to this fantastic discussion about the Psalms with Adam. Very, very happy to introduce Dr. Adam Carlill. He was born in Clacton-on-Sea and was baptized in the local Methodist church where he went to Sunday school. He was taken to evensong at the local Anglican church from an early age and joined the church choir when he was 8 years old, forsaking Sunday school, I understand, in order to sing matins from the Book of Common Prayer. After leaving school, he took his BA in theology at Keble College, Oxford, before spending a year as the dean's volunteer in St. George's Cathedral, Jerusalem. He trained for Anglican ministry at Lincoln Theological College and has been in full-time parish ministry continuously since 1990. He has been the vicar of St. George's, Tilehurst since 1998, becoming additionally the vicar of the neighboring parish of St. Mary Magdalene's, or Magdalene's, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. In 2013, he received his DPhil in Old Testament theology at St. Peter's College, Oxford, with his thesis Cherubim and Seraphim in the Old Testament, subsequently becoming a member of the Society for Old Testament Study. Frustrated at not being able to use the Psalms in worship more widely, in 2015, Adam decided to do something about it, systematically working through the Hebrew Psalter, translating each psalm into modern metrical English and publishing them in 2018 in Psalms for the Common Era, modern metrical psalms for individuals, choirs, and congregations. Adam is a member of the Hymn Society of Great Britain and Ireland and serves on the executive committee. Welcome, Adam. Really excited for your talk.
Thanks, Delvin. Lovely to see you all here this evening. I'm going to share my screen, and please, everybody, make sure you got your volume up because I'm going to be playing tracks later on, and that's going to be that one. So hopefully you can all see that. And can everybody see that? Okay. Right. So let's begin by hearing Psalm 131 in Hebrew and in English. I'll read it in Hebrew first. Shir hama'aloth leDavid. Adonai lo ravach libi, velo ramu enai, velo hilachti begadoloth uveniflaoth mimeni. Imlo, shivithi v'domamti nafshi, keramul ale imo, kagamul alai nafshi. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai, me'ata v'ad olam. Okay, and I think, Delvin, you're going to read in English.
Yes, and I've chosen the King James Version. Perhaps controversial, but I love it. So here we go. Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor mine eyes lofty. Neither do I exercise myself in great matters or in things too high for me. Surely I have behaved and quieted myself as a child that is weaned of his mother. My soul is even as a weaned child. Let Israel hope in the Lord from henceforth and forever.
Thank you very much. Now, I chose this psalm because it's short, so we can explore how it's been presented in multiple contexts without being here all night. And before I begin, I should note that this is not a scientific presentation. It's a snapshot of different ways in which Psalm 131 has been translated, reworked, or sung. And there are three parts. First of all, I'm going to have a close look at verse 2. Which I think suggests a female voice in the psalm that has been largely ignored or suppressed. Secondly, I'm going to look at some metrical translations of the psalm into English to see how different aspects of the psalm have been drawn out. And then I'm going to play some tracks, musical versions of Psalm 131 that struck me as particularly interesting for a variety of reasons. So let's have a close look at verse 2. Here it is in Hebrew. Now, the first thing to note is that I've assumed two lines for this verse, so I've laid them out accordingly, both ending in the word nafshi, my soul. And this is despite what's called an athnach under the word imo. For those of you who know Hebrew, you'll know exactly why that's an issue, because the athnach is the sign that marks what the people who wrote the Hebrew text out thought was halfway point. And I'm putting the halfway point in a different place. But that will be important for later on. There is a close parallel in the first half of the verse with the two verbs shivithi and the mamti. There they are, marked around in red. They both give a causative sense which is I have calmed and quieted. Shivithi v'dhomanti. And we'll find that this sentiment of calm quietness dominates the tone of the musical settings later on. Now let's take a look at this phrase in the second line. You'll see I have not ringed nafshi. That's because it concludes the second line in the same way that it does the first line. But I want to take the rest of the second line, this first bit in green, on its own. Again, like the verbs of the first line, we have a close parallel. Keramul ale imo and kagamul alai. Both phrases use the same preposition, al, which has the basic meaning of upon. But it can also mean, by extension, on the ground of, according to, on account of, on behalf of, concerning, beside, in addition to, together with, beyond, above, over, by, onto, towards, to, and against. I want to keep the basic meaning upon. Upon his mother and upon me. You can see that there is an exact parallel with the preposition. His mother, me. So let's have a look at some translations. Although the Septuagint, that's the Greek one at the top there, keeps the meaning of upon, epi, it changes the meaning of the second phrase, making the soul the thing that has the child on it. Epiten spuken mu. Now, that's possible if you repoint the Hebrew word alai to the same pointing as the first occasion, ale. So it actually does work as a translation, but it's slightly odd in terms of what that actually means. Like a weaned child upon its mother, like a weaned child upon my soul. That's a bit, if you've calmed and quieted your soul and now the soul is on itself, sort of thing. So that's where the Septuagint has gone. Interestingly enough, the Septuagint translates gamul in two different ways. There's apogegalactis menon, weaned, and antipodosis, reward, recompense. Both are possible translations of that word, but they've moved away from the parallel. Now, the New Jerusalem Bible translates soul as myself, muddying the water somewhat. And similarly, the King James Version, which we've just heard, avoids any awkwardness by a free rendering, which ignores the preposition altogether. This is sad, because the King James Version dominates the recorded English versions that we'll see later. The New International Version, the New Revised Standard Version, and the Jewish Publication Society all follow the Hebrew pointing alai. However, they all, to a lesser or greater degree, move away from the powerful image of a child upon its mother, translating the preposition as with or within. The simplest meaning, upon its mother and upon me, is, I suggest, what was intended. Now, at this point, I want to draw your attention to the definite article in the second gamul. So this, I think, steers the meaning in the direction I'm proposing. So you'll see the first one on the right-hand side there, keramul, indefinite article, so like a weaned child, and on the left-hand side, kagamul, like the weaned child. Okay, and nearly all the translations just ignore that little difference there. But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a child upon its mother, like the child upon me, my soul. Who is this mother that we are speaking about, who's speaking about the state of her soul and comparing it to the child that lies on top of her? We don't know, and it doesn't really matter. We might even enter the dangerous territory of authorship. If we imagine the superscription of the psalm, Shir HaMakaloth LeDavid, to be original, we might imagine one of David's wives writing it for David, LeDavid. If we don't think it's original and we just want to separate that bit off, we might imagine a senior woman in Jerusalem at a later date, Huldah, the prophet, perhaps, 2 Kings 22:14, whose husband was the keeper of the wardrobe. After all, anonymous female texts in the Bible do exist, who after all was Lemuel's mother in Proverbs chapter 31. You could go further still and imagine a single female author for all of the songs of ascents, but that might be pushing it a bit too far. Now, let's change gear and look at Christian English metrical versions of this psalm. Now, there isn't time for me to enter into the story of psalm singing in Christian circles, but for a good history of metrical psalm singing, Michael Morgan's chapter, Singing the Psalms in the Oxford Handbook of the Psalms, is a very good place to start. So let's begin with Isaac Watts, Hampshire-born congregational godfather of English hymnody. Watts loses the confidence of the first verse by asking God to look and make sure there are no proud looks and haughty looks and a haughty soul. Is there ambition in my heart? Search, gracious God, and see. Or do I act a haughty part? Lord, I appeal to thee. His treatment of the second verse is interesting because he removes all reference to a mother and inserts the father of Christian theology. I charge my thoughts, be humble still, and all my carriage mild. Content my father with thy will, and quiet as a child. In the final verse, Israel has been replaced by saints, not an unreasonable sidestep, and possibly driven by the demands of writing metrical verse. The patient soul, the lowly mind, shall have a large reward. Let saints in sorrow lie resigned, and trust a faithful Lord. And then we come to John Newton, evangelical Anglican minister, sometimes slave trader, before his conversion, and famous for the hymns Amazing Grace and Glorious Things of Thee Are Spoken, has taken a similar line to Isaac Watts. The whole hymn is a prayer to God to make him trustful. Like Watts, he has no overt reference to a mother other than as the impersonal care beyond his own. And again, God the Father takes over in the last line. Quiet, Lord, my froward heart, make me teachable and mild, upright, simple, free from art, make me as a weaned child, from distrust and envy free, please with all that pleases thee. What thou shalt today provide, let me as a child receive. What tomorrow may betide, calmly to thy wisdom leave. 'Tis enough that thou wilt care, why should I the burden bear? As a little child relies on a care beyond his own, knows he's neither strong nor wise, fears to stir a step alone. Let me thus with thee abide, as my Father, guard and guide. Unlike Watts, there is no equivalent in this hymn of verse 3 of the psalm. This is effectively a Christian meditation on verses 1 to 2, something that we shall see repeated in modern musical settings. In contrast to Watts and Newton, we have this version from the 1912 Trinity hymnal. This is a much closer to the original poem and represents the strand of Christian metrical psalmody which tries to depart as little as possible from Scripture. As a result, the mother is made visible again. Not haughty is my heart, not lofty is my pride. I do not seek to know the things God's wisdom has denied. With childlike trust, O Lord, in you I calmly rest, contented as a little child upon its mother's breast. O people of the Lord, in him alone confide, from this time forth and evermore, his wisdom be your guide. As a result, there's the mother. I think this is possibly more like my translation, literal translation of the psalm, than some of the things like the King James and so on. It's actually allowing, but it's a child upon its mother's breast. But it is third person. Cycling forward a few years, we come to Christopher Idle, another Anglican priest and still active in hymn writing circles in England. His version of Psalm 131 also stays close to the source text. Like Watts and Newton, he ascribes his calm state of mind to God, but states it as a fact rather than as an aspiration. Lord, you have weaned my heart from pride, my eyes from scorn are free. No longer am I occupied with thoughts too high for me. Contented now and reconciled, secure from all alarms, my heart is quiet as a child, safe in its mother's arms. O set your hope on Israel's God, all you that know his name. Now and forever trust the Lord, eternally the same. And this text has recently been republished in a complete metrical psalter by David Preston, Lament and Laughter. Martin Leckebusch is Vice President of the Hymn Society of Great Britain and Ireland, and he published his complete metrical Psalter in 2006. Here, the confident statement of verse 1 is restored. No lofty dreams are mine, no cold contempt or pride. I crave no share in vast concerns to keep me satisfied. Closer to the Hebrew, that. Verse 2 keeps the mother, but like the versions we've already seen, she's in the third person at mental arm's length. Within its mother's arms, a child may safely rest. With such contentment for my soul, I too am richly blessed. Israel is changed to people in the third verse. In God I am content, in God I rest secure. Let all his people hope in him both now and evermore. This one is my version, published in 2018. I've singularly failed here, actually, to mark the presence of soul as being the halfway point in verse 2, but you've got to compromise some things, haven't you? However, I've kept the plain meaning of Alai. My infant soul is sleeping at my breast. I'm trying to emphasize, begging the reader to imagine a female voice there. You'll notice the italic his in the second verse. Within my soul is calm, in pace at rest, an infant child upon his mother's breast. That's because I invite, throughout the volume, I invite the reader, allow the reader to change the gender of the pronoun where the pronoun could be generic without actually affecting the rhythm of the poem. For the rest of this presentation, and probably the greater part of it, I'm going to be looking at musical settings of the psalm. And to do this, I put the search term Psalm 131 into iTunes to see what would come up. And there were over 100 tracks came up, including inevitably some duplicates. I've chosen a selection for you which illustrate the wide tonal range in which Psalm 131 has been treated. I've not included many vocal renditions of the King James Version, most of which were male voices, although there were 2 female audio Bibles in the list, one of which was the King James. So we'll start with this one. This track was one of very few Hebrew versions, and the only one that might be labelled traditional from a Jewish perspective. For more about Duo Tehillim, just take a look at their Facebook page. So I'm going to play this and see what happens. Hopefully this will work. Here we go.
שיר המעלות לדוד השם, לא גבה ליבי ולא רמו עיניי, ולא הילכתי בגדולות ובנפלאות ממני, אם לא שיביתי ודוממתי נפשי. כגמולה לאימו, כגמולה לנפשי. יחל ישראל אל השם.
Yeah. So moving on, the vast majority of tracks were soloists, usually with guitar or an equivalent choir instrument. This one by Ian White was by far the most popular because you can see how many, how often it's been downloaded on the right-hand side. Ian White, Ayrshire-born, he studied divinity at Aberdeen University and began writing musical settings for the Psalms partly as a result of his studies. And he has a huge range of Psalms on YouTube. So if you just go to that YouTube link, you'll find them. But have a listen to this one. This is sort of typical of the vast majority that was on YouTube.
Not a proud heart not a proud eye, no concern for things too great for me. Not a proud heart, not a proud eye, no concern for things too great for me. I have stilled my soul like a well-fed child. I have stilled my soul like a well-fed child. For now and evermore, for now and evermore, hope is in the Lord who is Israel. For now and evermore, for now and evermore, hope is in the Lord who is Israel. I have stilled my soul like a well-fed child. I have stilled my soul like a well-fed child.
Now, for something completely different. Reggae often expresses religious themes. My colleague in Reading, Reverend Polly Falconer, who writes calypso music, informs me that unlike European musical tradition, in which passion is often expressed musically by tone, mode, and melody, in her culture, volume is the key element. So a very sad song in reggae or calypso might be in a major key, but it's the volume in which gives the passion. So this reggae song was one of the most popular downloads of this psalm on iTunes. It not only uses words from Psalm 131, but it also uses the singer refers to the fact that he's using Psalm 131 and for more about the Jamaican band, something out online so let's just have a little listen to what they're doing.
Rastafari. Love I Selassie I. Well, Jah, my heart is not a heart in our mind. I still love thee, oh no. Neither will I exercise myself in vain matters, that's not for me. Jah, my soul is not a heart in our mind. I still love thee, oh no. I only play my song of degrees. Alright. Psalm 131, a song of humility. Still we're searching for true tranquility. And even though my enemies increase, I love Rastafari. In a world of psychological disease.
Okay. This is the only spoken track that I've included. It's here because of the instrumental background, which is gritty and urban, unlike most of the musical interpretations available. It may strike us as odd, but the producers are hopeful that it will cut across cultural boundaries. According to their own website, Streetlights is a ministry of creative communicators called to intentionally engage global urban culture with the gospel of Jesus Christ by producing, translating, teaching, and proclaiming God's word so all can understand. Our identity and call are founded on the belief that God's word is transformational and needs to be accessible and understandable to all people. Even though the music is gritty, it does pause at places through the psalm to give the sense of peace that the psalm invokes. So here we go.
Psalm chapter 131, a song for pilgrims ascending to Jerusalem, a psalm of David. Lord, my heart is not proud, my eyes are not haughty. I don't concern myself with matters too great or too awesome for me to grasp. Instead, I have calmed and quieted myself, like a weaned child who no longer cries for its mother's milk. Yes, like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, put your hope in the Lord, now and always.
Okay. And then there's jazz. Jeremy Walker's suite of 7 psalms was performed at the Orchestra Hall in his hometown of Minneapolis, and you can find more about him at jeremywalkermusic.com. In the jazz genre as well, this also it gets the tone of the psalm within the jazz environment. So I'm just going to start it a little bit way in because it's quite a long track again. So let's try it from there. Kinderen Zingen Psalmen appears to be a uniquely Dutch project. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's children singing psalms. And here's their version of Psalm 131. This is the only track in the search that is sung by children, which is rather ironic given the psalm is about being like a child. Now, you'll notice so far that men have dominated this presentation. This in particular makes the possible female of the voice of the psalm even more suppressed. However, things are about to change, but before we get to the female vocalists, I want to draw your attention to two classical choral versions of the psalm. And the first is a contemporary setting by Estonian composer Arvo Pärt. Born in 1935, Pärt is one of the most popular living composers of our day. His music is ethereal, especially his writing for upper voice, and his work De Pacem Domine was composed in 2004. This recording is by the Estonian Philharmonic Chamber Choir with Christopher Bowers Broadbent on organ and published by Harmonia Mundi. The other choral arrangement is to Anglican chant. For those who don't know it, Anglican chant is like a four-part recitative, enabling prose psalmody to be sung in harmony. The text is the translation by Miles Coverdale, which he made for the Great Bible of 1535. It was used as a psalter in the Anglican Book of Common Prayer of 1662, and 360 years on is still widely used in Anglican settings around the world. The chant here is by David Wilcox and performed by the Chapel Choir of University College Durham. Now, at last, for some female voices. We start with Ruth Fazal. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name properly, but if somebody knows it, please correct me. Christian worship leader, songwriter, violinist, and classical composer, Ruth has travelled extensively in America, Europe, and Israel. This version of Psalm 131 was one of the most popular tunes on iTunes and illustrates nicely how the tone of the psalm can be reproduced with music. The emphasis on the image of the child and its mother reflects my own reading of the psalm as a female voice, and it begins with some very familiar classical music.
Oh Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with thoughts too great and marvelous, but I have calmed and quieted my soul like a child with its mother, like a child with
Hawaiian-based Christian musician Sarah Sparks takes the first verse of the psalm as her inspiration, quoting the gospel story of the man who shows doubt about Jesus' ability to heal his son and wrestling with unbelief. The song, set at night, matches the restful tone of the psalm. But my eyes are not raised too high, and my heart is not lifted up. I will calm and quiet my soul, and I believe, help my unbelief.
Another night I'm awake in my bed. There is no sleep inside with a war in my head. I find myself rising up instead of waiting upon my God. By 3 a.m. I am praying for sleep, for the sun rises soon and I've had no relief. Making war, but I'm desperate for peace and desperate upon my God. But my eyes are not raised too high, and my heart is not lifted up. I will calm and quiet my soul, and I believe, help my unbelief.
I've been unable to find out anything about Joanna Chong, but her version of Psalm 131 also has a restful tone. She expands on the main image of verse 2, the child at rest. However, she takes the imperative of the third verse, addresses it to O Christian, and makes the whole psalm an imperative.
Shall be your soul, so quieted and still, that struggle striving cease. Rest in silence, a wind shall knows no harm. It frets not for its needs, just reposes, secure every cry. Your heart be not lifted up, your eyes seek not love to see.
Leslie Ravel's autobiographical song is extraordinary. It takes the image of the child on the mother's breast and initially changes it to the image of a woman on her husband's breast. This song later rejects this image in favour of the biblical ritual as part of the writer's personal journey. The song is energetic, comes from a different starting point than the psalm, but it shows how scripture can be used in a surprising way.
I called you up to correct for me the error of my life. Don't know what I expected, but I know that I was looking for you to make me right. You said you had no answers, and I thought the storm would never break. But then you said you loved me and called me by my name. Calm and comforted my soul like a woman at her husband's breast, like a lover who is comforted is my soul. When I thought God had abandoned me,
This next track from 2021 has departed from the psalm significantly. It's a devotional Christian song based on the cross of Christ. But the thing that struck me is the way Caroline Sparks has moved from the image of a child on its mother to herself at the feet of God the Father. I will quiet my soul. Lord, I give you control. All that I'm holding on to, I let go. I leave it at the cross. I'll meet you at the altar. I'll meet you at your feet. I come to you, my Father. Lord, have your way in me.
In the midst of all your glory, I'm blameless in your sight. If the weight of the world's on my shoulders, and it feels like I can't get out from under, I will quiet my soul. Lord, I give you control. All that I'm holding on to, I let go. I leave it at the cross. I'll meet you at the altar. I'll meet you at your feet. I come to you, my Father. Lord, have your way in me. Lord, have your way in me.
For my last track, we turn to the Hebrew poem again, and Leonard Bernstein setting off it as part of the Chichester Psalms, an extended choral piece which was written for the Southern Cathedrals Festival in Chichester in 1965. The piece consists of 3 parts with 2 psalms in each. Part 3 combines Psalm 131 with Psalm 133. The music is lyrical and contains exciting and surprising tonality, which evokes both the ancient nature of the psalm and the peaceful tone of its sentiment. So let's just hear this version to finish with. So, what have we learned? That Psalm 131 may be one of the rare female voices in the Bible. If it is, this voice has been consistently played down or removed completely by translators both ancient and modern. And in the wide variety of musical settings of the psalm available today, singer-songwriters can re-evoke this female voice should they choose to do so. Thank you for listening. I'll stop sharing, shall I, Thea? Okay.
Thank you very much, Adam. As a musician, that's right up my alley to see many different versions of settings and responses to the psalm. And it's a fantastic way to dig into the scripture, I think. We could probably talk about each of those settings for an hour and plumb the different ways the themes they bring out. But before we open up for questions, I thought I would just ask you, which of these that you played for us is your favorite, or would you say maybe the most faithful to the meaning? Now, I know those could be different, but I wonder what your just sort of personal responses are to the various ones you shared with us.
I mean, in terms of the music, the one that sort of really got me emotionally was Joanna Chung. It was just that straight sort of, it's about like a child on its mother, you know, and she goes in and she expands on the image, and the tone just go, yeah, that's where I'm at with that song. I mean, having said that, I do like the Bernstein. So.
I just wanted to point out that the one that struck me, I don't remember which artist it was, but it was the one that begins with the Bach Gounod Ave Maria quote.
Yeah,
which of course is completely gives a resonance with and a reference to a specific child on a specific mother's breast.
Yes.
I don't know if that artist was Catholic or not, but there's a very clear identification with the Christian story. I wonder what your thoughts were about that one.
That was potentially my second favorite, actually. I did like what Ruth did with that, and I didn't know enough about the reference. I knew the tune, but I'm not a musician, so but yeah, I just thought she got the tone of it absolutely right. So yeah, but of course I'm coming at it from a European musical tradition, so you know, that's going to work for me. Although I do like the Pert as well. I'm a big fan of Arvo Pärt. It's difficult to choose. It's like being in a sweet shop, isn't it?
Having worked with the Hebrew text here, are there? No, I don't know if you're a composer yourself, but obviously you have a poetic sensibility and you speak Hebrew. Are there certain sonic characteristics of this original Hebrew text that you think call out for kind of or what kind of affective dimension do you think that the sonic or poetic, if you will, attributes of the original refer to? Does that make sense?
There's quite a lot of soft labials and it's quite a soft sound. And I tried to bring it out when I was actually reading the Hebrew out. I mean, how you pronounce Hebrew, of course, there's different ways of doing it in different places. So I was taught a fairly sort of close, tight way of pronouncing it, but in many places it's loosened up somewhat now. Depending on how you pronounce your Hebrew, I like to get the soft sounds through, you sometimes pick that up when you're reading through it, but it's interesting, you know, the two words gamul, because the first one has an indefinite arting in front of it. The first g is actually a r. It's aspirated, and many people don't distinguish that. But I like the softer aspirated sounds, and try to bring that out when I was speaking it.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this really interesting event. Thank you, Adam, for sharing your passion for the Psalms and your creative work and also your research abilities when it comes to music. For attending, we look forward to seeing you at our next event.